So this video is going to focus on thesis statements. Thesis statements are 1 or 2 sentences that summarizes your basic argument for your reader. These are typically found in the introduction, and they are really important to have early on. I really believe that you can make or break an essay with a strong or weak thesis. So it's really important to have this going in your mind as you start researching. So one way to think about this is, what do you want your audience to believe by the end of this essay? That's what your thesis should convey. Now, I'm going to be showing you this worksheet and one other one. I will not be providing you links to these because some of the examples aren't great, but I want to use these to talk about what makes a strong thesis or what makes a weak thesis. So we're going to go through and start about the process of how to make a thesis statement and then what to do with it once we have it. So first things first, to start writing a thesis statement, I really recommend you start with a research question. Now, some of you have probably written essays in the past, and maybe some of you have ever wondered, did I do this? Am I done? Did I do a good job? One of the ways to kind of help combat this feeling of uncertainty if you finished or not is to have a research question in mind first. And that way you can see, did I answer this? Your thesis is meant to be your answer. But keep in mind, your thesis is meant to be a statement, not a question. So it's important that your research question turns into a statement for your thesis. So we have 2 here. Why was Thomas Jefferson opposed to slavery? And what happened to the juvenile court system to bring it to a crisis point? Now, the second one kind of implies you might need some research before you can describe that. So especially if you're claiming it is now a crisis point, so maybe some history in your introduction would be helpful there. So the readers came up with these 2. The first is, even though Thomas Jefferson had slaves, he showed that he valued every human being in his words and actions. That's a pretty big gap, going from saying that he valued every human being except for the population that he enslaved. That's a weak thesis. There's a huge gap there, and it's also very vague. Being in his words and actions, I wouldn't accept that as a thesis. That needs a lot of work. The second one's a little better. The juvenile court system was established to remove children from the adult criminal justice system and help youth reform, but over the years it became a source of punishment and imprisonment. So this might be one of those 2-sentence thesis statements because I'm not really sure what the argument is yet. Is it going to argue that it has become a source of punishment and imprisonment? Or is this going to say what needs to be changed to deal with the fact that it's become a source of punishment and imprisonment? So in this case, word choice really matters because I'm not exactly sure where the focus of the argument is going to be here yet. So when you're looking at thesis statements, they give you some suggestions here at the bottom of these 5 questions you may want to ask yourself. Is it clear what the project will be about? Do you have an obvious topic? Is it arguable? Now, we've discussed this in previous slides, and I've shown you some research before this, but arguable, again, means that someone from the opposing side can present evidence to support their ideas. So again, this is logical people, not necessarily the internet. The internet can argue anything. But can you present evidence from both sides to debate this topic? Will research be necessary to prove the thesis? The answer must always be yes. If I say, is the sky blue? Well, yeah, you can go into the different ways we see the color blue or why the chemicals react the way they do, but ultimately there's not really much research needed for that. And is there only one main idea? Now, this is different from points because I expect all of your papers will need to have more than one argument point, but this means that there's a clear purpose. So this is all on one topic rather than multiple topics. And this last one, is it something in the past that is important? That typically influences the introduction more than anything else. This is saying that even though this happened in the past, it remains to be important. So this might mean you may need to spend more time in your introduction explaining some ideas or explaining why this is still an issue. So going down here, I'm just going to go over a few of these in terms of what is weak and what is strong. The first 2 are very weak. They're not even full sentences. I suppose the first one actually is. Sorry about that. Yes, it is. Richard J. Daley died in 1976. There's not much of a debate about that unless there was some question about how he died or when he died. It's not much of an argument. And the second one, Artists of Chicago, 1890 to 1990, is more of a category than a statement. As we said before, juvenile court system, I really recommend another sentence to that to clarify what the argument's going to be focused on. But let's look at some of these. Pesticides kill thousands of farm workers and must be stopped. That kind of sounds like there's this giant cloud of pesticides floating around attacking people. It needs some more clarity. We are choosing to use pesticides, so how are they killing farm workers? How do you want them to stop? What's the argument going to be about? The next one, German immigrants in Chicago had enormous difficulties during World War I as they were forced to choose between being German and an enemy or forsaking Germany to be an American. Again, I'm not really sure what the argument is. Enormous difficulties doing what? What about World War I especially was difficult for them compared to World War II, for example? That needs some more information. You really have to be more specific than that. Before Title IX, there were few female basketball players. Title IX is a protection act, so it is meant to lead to gender equality in sports specifically. Title IX argues that you need to have the same amount of funding for both male and female sports, and you also have to have the same amount of sport options. So, for example, in my high school, we actually had to add a soccer team because we were not meeting Title IX standards. This one, obviously, they would need to explain Title IX in their intro in some form, but there's no real argument yet. So they're saying there were few. Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? What about Title IX changed that? This needs more information. It's similar with the second one, the following one. How did the jungle make an impact on the foods we eat? The Jungle was a novel written by Sinclair. It's basically a discussion, kind of almost an expose on what the meat and food packaging industry was like. It was pretty horrific. A lot of people argue that after the publication of The Jungle, many changes were made because of that specifically. But keep in mind, a thesis statement, again, is meant to be a statement, not a question. So the thesis would be your argument. Not only did The Jungle actually make an impact, but how? The last one is a bit of a grammatical mess, so I'll correct it as I read it. The reversal of the Chicago River, which improved sanitary and health conditions of Chicagoans, demonstrated that science and technology cannot solve problems unless there are economic motives and political will. You could write a book on this. I really wish they spent more time talking about the Chicago River because I didn't really know about this until I was an adult. But science and technology is just huge, and economic motives and political will, that's also huge. So for this case, I would really recommend narrowing it down. You might want to focus on one particular law. You may want to focus on one person who made this happen or a scientist who proposed something. But it just needs some more information here. So we're going to pause here, and then I will take you over to the next worksheet.